So I'm losing my voice, so just have to bear with me. But I'm gonna do a video anyways because I can still talk, and well, I like to talk. A really good question was asked: how much protein can you use, for building muscle in a single meal? And I felt like this deserved its own video because it's such a good question, and it's worth discussing. The very first part of this is that I don't have a definitive answer for you. I can't say, oh, it's 26 grams or it's 27.5 grams, right? There's no magical number that anyone that tries to tell you that there's some magical number, you can ignore that person because there's no way for someone to tell you definitively X number of grams. Now, what we can say is we can look at digestion and how things break down, how protein is metabolized, and you can look at things like demand and understand protein turnover, and you can get a rough estimate of basically how much of this protein is actually going to your muscle. But this is the part that I thought about later. So I answered the question in the comments, and I thought about it more, and I was like, gosh, this is such a convoluted topic of protein, because you don't just use protein for building muscle. And if you thought about this logically, if your muscle breakdown was rather significant, you would have even greater need for protein, which means that you probably could synthesize even more, realizing though that what we're doing is we're synthesizing repair of muscle. So it's still going to muscle, but you aren't netting a gain, if that makes sense. So to make this really simple, let's pretend we have 100 grams of muscle protein, and you break down 10 of it. Okay, you now have a net of 90, right? So then you eat, and you want to get back to that 100 first before you start building additional muscle on top of it, right? So you want to repair the muscle that was broken down so that you're back to a net zero. And then beyond that is the question that we have to ask ourselves here. And I think that Justin Harris has addressed this very well. I'm not going to try to reinvent the wheel or something. He's explained this better than I possibly can. Basically, you can gain, if you optimized absolutely everything, you could gain about 24, 25 grams of muscle, actual muscle protein. Like, this would be like beef jerky, right? Like, it's dried out. It's really just the protein is left. So I've shared this on Instagram. If you guys follow me on Instagram, you already know this. I tried to optimize absolutely everything because I had a rare opportunity where I was able to work out multiple times a day. And I thought, okay, well, for this period of time, I'm just going to go all out and see if I can't optimize absolutely everything. And one thing I'd like to point out is, regardless of the weight that I gained, I'm not foolish enough to think that some of that isn't water and glycogen, right? So, like, when you gain muscle, let's say you gain a pound of muscle, okay? That pound of muscle also is going to come with, like a pound of glycogen and maybe 3 to 4 pounds of water with it. So for you to gain 1 pound of actual muscle protein, like actual muscle tissue, right, your scale weight is still going to increase by somewhere around like 4 to 5 pounds because there's glycogen and there's water that comes with that. So whenever you see the scale weight go up by 5 pounds, that's awesome. You've probably gained a pound of actual tissue because there's other things that come in with it. So back to our question of how much of the protein can you use? This is one of the parts that I get kind of hung up on, is that when I look at the research, and I'm not someone who's science-based, I just read it because it's worth reading it and knowing what it says, looking at the literature. Sometimes literature is useful. But when you show me a study of using whey protein or casein or EAAs, all these proteins that digest very quickly, I don't feel like we can really apply that. And especially because, like, let's just take something else that glycemic index. If you ate a slice of white bread by itself, it has a very different glycemic index than if you had a slice of white bread with butter on it and, I don't know, you put turkey on it. So now you're having a turkey sandwich. That's going to digest differently than a slice of white bread by itself. This is why the whole glycemic index thing doesn't really make sense. Like, if you took white rice and you're like, oh, look, if I eat plain white rice, it has this really high glycemic index. And it's like, yeah, but no one does that. You're probably going to have some meat with it. Maybe you have ground beef mixed in with it. So now you got protein and fat. And then you're probably going to mix in some vegetables. And so now there's fiber, and like, it just changes it changes everything, actually. I don't want to say it just changes just the glycemic index. Like, it changes everything. Like, if you guys are out there testing your blood glucose, like, you can see this very quickly. There are certain foods that when you eat them, your blood glucose goes through the roof, and there are other foods that have the same number of carbs. So you would think, oh, 20 carbs is 20 carbs, right? And yet you don't get the same blood glucose response, and that because, well, depends on what you're eating, and so that you get this delayed effect. Fiber and things like that, it takes longer to digest. So my point here, right, is about protein. So if you were drinking whey protein in isolation by itself, right, it digests really fast. And I think the problem with that is that I don't want to shit on whey protein, because I think whey protein is still a good supplement for people to use. In fact, I think it's probably the only supplement that I actually would ever recommend. I don't recommend things to people. I'm not like, oh, creatine, you have to have it, because I recommend that people eat meat. So like, I also don't like vitamin D. There's one that you probably should supplement, because most of us don't live at a latitude where you can get enough vitamin D from the sun. But outside of that, it's like people get crazy about stuff like, oh, you got to have citrulline. And it's like, nah, not really. Like, citrulline doesn't make that much of a difference. TMG, trimethylglycine, like, I'm a big fan, but I'm a big fan of it because of health reasons, not because I think it's so incredible for improving your performance. So if you were to eat a meal of actual food, I think this is going to have a very different response. So when you see these things and people are telling you, oh, 30 grams of protein is the most you can possibly use in a meal, the rest just gets wasted. Bullshit. I don't think that that's how food gets digested at all. And you can tell me that you disagree, but the problem is there's no study out there. There's nothing evaluating this. Like, there isn't a study on, like, what happens when you eat a pound of steak. Like, nope, sorry, that study does not exist. And so I want you to consider this. If you eat steak, okay, and then you get sick and throw up 4 or 5 hours later, you will throw up steak. It's undigested. Well, so much for that whole theory that, like, if you eat this protein, it just gets rapidly converted into glucose. Why do I still have steak in my stomach for me to throw up if protein beyond 30 grams just gets rapidly converted into glucose? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Again, back to testing your blood glucose, okay? I've never eaten a steak and then seen my blood glucose shoot through the roof. Doesn't happen. And it goes up a little, don't get me wrong, but that's probably due to the effect of glucagon. I don't actually think that the steak is getting converted into glucose that rapidly. I don't think that process happens nearly as fast as people think it does. And actually, strange as it is, people talk about how your body doesn't have a way of storing protein, which I disagree. That doesn't even make sense. But think about this for a minute. If you eat a whole bunch of steak, it takes quite a while for it to digest in your stomach. So you have this slow titration of amino acids entering your bloodstream. And then we have these things like the splanchnic bed and the hepatic bed, right? And then, of course, you have the ileum. And so you have this thing called an ileal brake. You can look it up. Like, don't just take my word for it. And that'll slow down your rate of digestion. So if you eat more food than you can digest and absorb and assimilate, your body actually has a whole bunch of mechanisms by which it'll slow your digestion down. Now, this only makes sense. Let's take an extreme scenario, because extremes are great for making kind of an illustration of a point. I haven't eaten in 10 days, and I am ravenously hungry, and I managed to kill some animal. And I sit down and eat 5 pounds of meat in that single sitting. Do you really think my body is so efficient that it would waste anything that I ate? No way. Like, we wouldn't have survived famines. We wouldn't have survived just the hardships of life if we were that weak and inefficient of a species. Just think about this logically. Like, primitive man probably spent a lot of time walking around looking for something to eat. And when he found something to eat, he probably ate as much as he possibly could. So, kind of don't buy the idea that you have some limit on how much you can use and assimilate and all these things like that. Now, all that being said, so let's say we have a really unbelievably hard workout and you break down a ton of muscle. We're going to do, let's do a favor to mine and do some 20 rep squats. And by 20 rep squats, I mean 20 rep breathing squats. So you take your 10 rep max, and then you basically just stand there with it on your back until you can do one more rep. And then you stand with it on your back, just trying to catch your breath and trying to recover till you can do one more rep. And you continue in this way until you get to 20, which is miserable. This is absolutely miserable. And if your legs aren't fried at the end of it, you didn't go heavy enough. I think my best 20 rep full depth squat was 255. My best 20 rep box squat was 295. Both of those were memorable workouts. How about that? How many times can you remember something like that? And I remember that because it was so miserable and I was so wrecked the next day. So that lets you know how fun those workouts are, the fact that you remember them like 10 years later. So this is the workout that we did. We just absolutely trashed ourselves. We went all out on some squats. And afterwards, I sit down and eat 3 pounds of meat. And of course, I'm not eating just meat. I'm probably going to have other things with it. I mean, if I'm having a steak, I'm probably going to put some butter on it, or I don't know, maybe have like a side of broccoli, asparagus, whatever. Like, we're doing a low carb thing even, all right? It doesn't have to be steak and potatoes, even though both Julie and I believe that steak and potatoes is the secret to longevity and health and happiness. So the point being, we're going to have a meal, and you're going to have a big meal at that. One, you just ate a whole bunch of steak, and that's going to take a long time to digest. Two, you had other foods with it, whether it's fat because you added butter, or you have asparagus or broccoli or spinach or whatever you had. That's going to slow down digestion as well. So now this is going to stay in your stomach for a longer period of time. And we're going to assume that you just broke down a whole bunch of muscle from this really hard workout. So the very first priority that your body has is to repair itself. This is evident. Look at burn victims. Burn victims will have a massive increase in their metabolic rate. Why? Because there's so much tissue damage and the body's trying to repair it. After your body goes through this process of taking as much of the amino acids as it possibly can and using that for repair, which, by the way, the only thing in your body that isn't getting repaired here, okay, just stop and think about this for a minute. Your body has turnover of your entire digestive tract. Like, your colon cells turn over. Those are made of protein. Like, your stomach cells turn over. Those are made of protein. Small intestine, those are made of protein. Like, your body's using protein for a lot more than just muscle. So a lot of those amino acids are getting shuttled into other tasks, whether they're going to your liver or they're going to, your tendons, your ligaments, your bones, your blood. You have to make new blood cells. Protein is used for a lot of things in the body besides muscle. So we ate this huge steak, and the very first priority of your body is to repair. So all the things that need to be repaired, that's what your body's going to use that protein for first. And as I pointed out, that steak is going to digest slowly. So think of it like you have an IV drip of protein coming in, amino acids coming in. Only it's through the process where your stomach is slowly breaking down these proteins and liberating those free amino acids into your bloodstream for your body to use. After that repair process is done, right, your body will try to build some new muscle, because it's kind of like a callus. Like, you did a whole bunch of work and your body says, oh shit, I need to adapt to this. I need a little more strength for next time. And so roughly somewhere around, as Justin pointed out, Justin Harris, maybe 24 to 25 grams of protein would be the most muscle that you could synthesize. And that's, after your repair process. That would be if you optimized absolutely everything, which no one does. Like, no one does. I realize that how hard that is. Even if you're sleeping as much as I do, and you make sleeping into a full-time job, and you take naps, and you do everything you can, and you become absolutely psychotic about making sure that you're in bed on time, and making sure that you're getting all the sleep. Yeah. I don't know that I necessarily believe you truly can do it just because of real-world application. But at least I believe Justin from a scientific standpoint that, scientifically, academically, technically, we could maximize 24 grams of protein, right? Protein synthesis into the muscle. But I feel like none of us are ever going to hit optimal. Or if you do, maybe you hit it for one day, and I just don't think it's realistic Like, you don't sleep the same every night. Even if you slept 11 hours every night, like, the quality of your sleep is not perfectly identical every night. So anyways, the point then being, how much protein can you use from a single meal? I think all of it. I don't think any of it gets wasted. And I really don't buy into the idea that your body is taking this massive amount of protein and turning it into glucose either. I know that that's commonly suggested. Lots of people will claim that the protein is getting converted into glucose, and that's why your blood glucose goes up. That's simply not true. The reason why your blood glucose goes up from large intakes of protein is because it causes a large release of glucagon, which is the opposite hormone to insulin. And I only mean opposite to insulin in the fact that it's liberating stored energy rather than storing energy. Insulin is great for storing energy. And the other part that I have to add to this is that there are all these other variables. Like, what if you have a whole bunch of carbs with your meal? Now you're going to get this nice big insulin spike. That'll probably actually improve your ability to transport more amino acids into the muscle. So there's all these other variables that come into play, and I just simply don't believe that our body is so inefficient that it would ever waste protein whenever there's still muscle to repair or there's still other processes which could be using the protein. My counter argument, though, and this isn't a counter argument to my own argument, this is a counter argument to the idea of eating all your protein in one sitting, is that that's hard on your digestion. Like, we've all done this. We've all done that mistake where you had way too much whey protein and it gave you, at best, protein farts, and at worst, you got diarrhea. So I do think that you can make yourself sick. We certainly know that protein is going to have a bit of an osmotic effect. It's draw some water in and things like that. You'll notice that you're really thirsty. The more protein you eat, the more thirsty you are, the more you urinate, the higher your BUN is. That's your blood urea nitrogen. Even your creatinine can go up if you're eating a lot of protein. And so this is just my own personal experience. I mean, I messed around with all these different things. Why not experiment? When I tried doing one meal a day, I don't have any weird story for you, like, oh, I lost all this muscle doing one meal a day. I didn't. But you know what I did do? I got up to pee, like 3 or 4 times a night. It was a real pain in the ass. And I was thirsty, like really thirsty. In the middle of the night, I'd wake up and be super thirsty and I'd have to pee. Not a good combination if you want to get good quality sleep. And I would tell you that I really don't feel like my digestion was all that great either. I had a lot of gastric upset. So simply spreading my protein out into multiple meals was a lot easier on my digestive tract. Like, I didn't have the protein farts, and I didn't have an upset stomach. I didn't have elevated BUN. That's one thing that made a big difference. Doing OMAD, my BUN went way up. And that's all the nitrogen. That's all that nitrogenous waste. But for what it's worth, and you might want to think about this in terms of your renal health in the long term, spreading your protein out across the day allows you to consume more protein because protein is very satiating. I try to eat 6 pounds of steak. It's not easy to eat 6 pounds of steak in a single sitting. If you're crazy like me, you can, because you love steak and you'll eat way past the point of satiety. But, go to Texas de Brazil. Hey, while I'm at it, Texas de Brazil, you guys should sponsor me. Yeah, if someone from Texas de Brazil is watching this, sponsor me. Same thing for Outback Steakhouse, for that matter. The prime rib at Outback Steakhouse, man, I could eat that all day long. I think that Outback Steakhouse should sponsor me and my channel. And if you guys just give me free steak, I will mention Outback Steakhouse in every video from now on. So anyways, the point being, okay, got off a little bit of a tangent there, but doing one meal a day, my BUN went up and my creatinine went up. And that's very concerning to me because I have renal disease. And by spreading my protein intake out, my BUN came way down, like total normal range, and my creatinine came way down, which is really interesting. In fact, I've actually regained kidney function. Part of that is probably also due to the fact that I listened to Dante Trudel and I started using Astragalus. So there's a little bonus tip in the middle of this video for you, or I guess towards the end of this video for you. If you stuck around, guess what? You just got a bonus tip. If you have weird renal markers, Astragalus is really effective. It's more effective than I would even realize. My dog also has renal disease, and we put him on Astragalus, and now his renal function is improving. figure that one out. Even my nephrologist was shocked. My nephrologist was like, I don't understand how you improved your renal function, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I told him what I'm doing, but he's like, I don't think herbs work. And I'm like, well, that's what I did. Anyways, point being, spreading your protein out is easier on your digestion. It's easier on your body. So I think that's the better argument for why you should spread your protein out rather than it being something about muscle. I really have a hard time believing that, if you ate 3 meals of 50, right? Or you ate 5 meals of 30, that there's going to be some massive difference, provided you're actually eating food digests slower. I don't think that you're going to see a massive difference. 150 grams of protein is 150 grams of protein, and I really don't think your body's so inefficient that somehow it's going to waste it if you ate 50 in 3 meals versus spreading it out across 5. But I do think for just your own discomfort, like we've all been bloated. It's not fun to try to squat when you're all bloated. At least I don't like trying to squat when I'm all bloated. I know some guys like to bloat on purpose because they squat in gear and it, I don't know, fills out their suit or some shit. But I don't squat in gear, so I don't really like being bloated. I don't even like the way I feel when I'm bloated, like just walking around normal. Like it's not fun walking around with your stomach all swollen. And I also don't like the fact that, eating one big meal at the end of the day or something like that, or intermittent fasting and putting all your meals at the end of the day, tends to give me disrupted sleep because I wake up to pee. I know. This is so weird. I'm talking about pooping and peeing, but I mean, these are just normal bodily functions, so I don't feel weird talking about it. If you guys feel weird about it, I don't know. I'm sorry for you. But this is just me being as honest as I possibly can. So whenever I did things like IF, and just waited 8 hours even before my first meal, I would still wake up at night to pee. Not as frequently as doing 1 meal a day, but still, it would disrupt my sleep. And if you're disrupting your sleep, you really got to ask yourself, is this thing helping you? Like if you're doing intermittent fasting and it's disrupting your sleep and you're waking up to pee, like, is the intermittent fasting really helping you? Because I think sleep is way more important than whether or not you're fasting for an extra 8 hours. That's just my, I think sleep is really important. I think you're going to gain more out of better quality sleep than you will out of just postponing your breakfast by 8 hours. Anyways, that's my best attempt at covering this from as many angles as possible and trying to be as thorough as possible. But the takeaway from this is that I don't really believe that there's an upper limit for how much protein you can utilize if you have sufficient damage that needs to be repaired. In terms of how much muscle you can actually gain, I think Justin Harris is probably right that it's somewhere around 24 grams. And that being said, we all know that you need to eat more than 24 grams because there's all these other processes going on in your body. Like if you just ate 30 grams of protein a day, it's not like 100% of that goes to muscle. You have all these other things in your body that need to be repaired. I mean, why do you have fingernails and hair and all these other things like that? Like your skin turns over, There's a lot of other things happening in your body. Your body isn't just using protein only for muscle. And that's why protein is, Proteus, and it's, primary. It's the root of the word protein. You guys can go look that up. Protein is primary. It's the most important thing for you to eat. You can survive without fat or carbs for a while. Actually, you can survive without carbs permanently. But you can't go very long without protein. And that whole thing on rabbit starvation, that's bullshit. I don't know where that, I know exactly where that came from. I don't know why I started the sentence off with that. I don't know where that came from. So I don't know why that's been perpetuated. How about that? I don't know why that myth continues to survive. Those explorers, they didn't die from rabbit starvation. They died from the fucking parasites. You can't eat rabbit and not think that you're gonna, I'm sorry, but eating raw rabbit meat is filled with parasites. So that's why they died. They died because of the parasites. They didn't die because somehow they got protein poisoning. That's bullshit. I don't know why that myth even continues to exist when it's clear that they died from the parasites, but whatever. That's strange how myths get started and they stick around. Squats are bad for your knees. And we all know that study just simply said, yeah, sure, squats cause more, shearing and compressive force in your knee. That doesn't mean it's bad for your knee. But we make weird conclusions. So anyways, that's another video for another time. Here's your answer. The answer is that basically I don't think that there is an upper limit I think that pretty much your body will let you know, hey, I'm full. And whatever that is your limit. But obviously, like, there's a reason why there's guys walking around with 400 pounds. They can eat more than you can. Like, Hafthor Bjornsson couldn't be as big as he is if there was some limit to the amount of protein that your body can utilize for muscle. Same thing goes for Brian Shaw, Eddie Hall, etc. Like, it's not like their digestive tract is all that different than yours. It isn't that much bigger than yours. Yes, they are bigger than you. They are, well, in my case, they're literally more than twice my size. But it's not like their stomach is physically twice the size of mine, nor is their colon, or at least I hope it's not that stretched out, but their organs are not that disproportionately large compared to yours, even though they carry disproportionately more bone and muscle mass. So that's basically where you can look at this whole thing and recognize that the idea that you can only eat 30 grams in a meal, that's based off of really flawed studies. Like, no one's drinking just whey protein, or at least they shouldn't be. And if you are, then I suppose you can go ahead and say, yeah, 30 grams is the limit, but I don't know. Call me crazy, but sometimes I think maybe food might be better than some processed supplement.